They say the truth will set you free, but my truth almost killed me. The morning of the wedding, I found my husband Robert locked in a passionate embrace with Serafina, my son's fiancée. But the real horror wasn't the kiss. It was the fact that my son, Lysander, was already watching them from the stairs. He found me hiding in the garden, and when I asked why he hadn't stopped them, he looked at the scene, then at me, and whispered, "Mom, don't. I've known for weeks, and trust me, it's worse than you think." Hello, family. If you're invested in this story and want to join me on this journey of raw truth and ultimate retribution, please take a second right now to hit the like button, and also let me know where in the world you are watching from. I was on my knees in my own garden dirt, the smell of lilac and wet mulch filling my nostrils. My good silk robe was snagged on a stupid rose thorn, but I didn't care. All I could see, framed perfectly by my own bay window, was Robert, my husband. He had his hands buried in Serafina's hair, my son's fiancée, and their kiss was pure, consuming hunger. It wasn't a mistake. It was an act of cold, calculated treason, happening right there on the sofa where we used to sit and plan our quiet life. I felt a raw, primal scream clawing its way up my throat. I was ready to throw open the garden door, to shred the scene with my bare hands, to just end the nightmare right then and there, when a shadow stopped me. Not the sun, but a flicker of movement reflected high up in the glass of the upstairs hallway. It was Lysander, my son. He was standing there, watching them too. A ghost in his pajamas, and the sight of him, my sweet boy, utterly annihilated by the very two people who should have loved him most, sucked all the fire out of my rage and replaced it with a terrifying, protective coldness. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was trapped in this horrible, silent tableau in my own backyard, in Atlanta, Georgia. I finally lurched forward, ready to stagger into the house and face the inevitable destruction, when a hand, strong, freezing cold, clamped down on my arm. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Lysander. He had slipped out and found me hiding behind the hydrangeas I'd spent all spring tending. He was pale, his eyes two chips of gray stone in a face etched with pain I hadn't put there. The wedding was set for 4 p.m. The white chairs were all lined up. The world was about to celebrate a lie. He didn't cry or scream. He just squeezed my arm tighter, pulling me deeper into the cool shadows of the bushes. "Mom, don't," he whispered, his voice thin and strained, barely a thread of sound. "Not yet." Not yet? They were inside, destroying his future, and he was telling me to wait? I choked on his name, unable to articulate the monstrous sight unfolding less than 10 feet away. "Not yet? Lysander, what are you saying? They're kissing," I stammered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. He shook his head, a faint bitter smile touching his lips. "I know what it is, Mom. I've known for weeks." The word hung in the humid air. Weeks. My son, my sweet, good boy, had been carrying this monstrous burden alone, silently watching his father's betrayal unfold. I was instantly overwhelmed by a sickening wave of guilt for not seeing the darkness that had been swallowing him. I dismissed Robert's strange behavior, the phone tilted away, the sudden late nights, as stress or work. I chose comfort over truth. But Lysander, the product of the marriage I thought was rock solid, had been investigating. He knew his father's charm was a shield, and Serafina's innocence was a disguise. "Why didn't you tell me, sweetie? You shouldn't have carried this by yourself," I whispered, fighting back the tears that would only distract me. He pulled out his phone, his hand trembling only slightly, and tapped the screen. "Because I needed proof, Mom, and I didn't want them to play the victim." He was right. I could already hear Robert's smooth, placating voice. "Selena, it's a misunderstanding. She's nervous." I was offering comfort. Lysander pulled up a file filled with high-resolution photos. The first was Robert and Serafina walking into the Four Seasons Charleston. The timestamp was 3 weeks ago. "There are 17 different occasions," Lysander said, his voice flat, like a lawyer reading a charge sheet. "Dinners, lunches, and hotel rooms. 17. The sheer, calculated magnitude of the deceit hit me, stealing my breath. This was a long-term, deliberate act of destruction. My personal rage, which had been momentarily suppressed, roared back to life, but now it was cold, focused, and aimed. I looked back at the house, where Robert was now unbuttoning Serafina's blouse on the sofa where Lysander and I used to read. I took a deliberate step toward the door again. "We are stopping this," I announced, my voice a fierce whisper. "Right now." Lysander clamped his hand down on my arm, pulling me back into the cover of the hydrangeas. "No, Mom, not now. We don't just end this. We dismantle it." His face was grim, his smile chillingly unfamiliar. "I have a plan. We use the wedding. We expose them publicly in front of everyone they tried to impress. We don't just give them a divorce. We deliver total destruction of their reputations." I looked at my son, the boy I had sheltered, now a terrifyingly ruthless strategist. The forgiving wife was gone. A woman who wanted justice was rising in her place. "Tell me the plan," I said, the words simple, final. The night that followed felt less like the eve of a wedding and more like a feverish conspiracy. Robert came home, radiating a sickening, false confidence, talking about his proud father speech and asking about the ice supply. I just nodded and smiled, playing the role of the oblivious wife, while inside I felt like a ticking bomb. As soon as his deep, oblivious snoring started, Lysander and I were in my small home office, which usually smelled of old paper and coffee, but now just reeked of betrayal. My training as a CPA meant I saw patterns in chaos, and I was now applying that cold, professional eye to the wreckage of my own marriage. The evidence on Lysander's flash drive, the secret meetings, the texts, was just the emotional part. The financial truth, I knew, would be far uglier. "Tell me about your detective," I said, pointing to a name on one of the surveillance reports. Lysander looked slightly relieved to finally share his burden. "Her name is Kate Clinton. She's not just a PI. Mom, she's Aunt Kate." I actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that was closer to a sob. Kate, my little sister. The former cop who had always been too smart, too cynical, to buy into Robert's charm. We hadn't been close lately. I'd been too ashamed to admit my perfect life was a sham. Of course, my son, unable to confide in his emotionally closed-off mother, had gone to the one person who knew how to hunt down a liar. Lysander looked sheepish. I knew she'd be quiet, and I knew she never really liked Dad. His simple honesty was a fresh wave of grief. I called her, well past midnight. Her voice was instantly sharp and alert. "Selena? What's going on?" I told her everything. The kiss, Lysander's detective work, the photos. I didn't cry. I just dictated the facts, my voice flat and cold. Kate listened patiently, her voice a calm, professional anchor in my storm of agony. I saw the way he looked at that girl, Selena. I hoped I was wrong, but Robert has always been weak. Her candor was brutal but necessary. "What else do you have, Kate? Tell me what the money says." Her voice dropped, turning clinical. "I've been tracking their movements for weeks. They meet twice a week at the St. Regis in Atlanta. He always pays cash. The expensive gifts, the dinners he'd never take you to, it's all documented. But Selena, there's something bigger than Serafina." I felt a terrifying certainty settle over me. I've been digging into Robert's financials. He's been sloppy. This isn't the first time. I found a series of regular monthly payments going back 15 years, always to the same person, a woman named Nichelle Jensen. The name meant nothing to me. Nichelle was a junior associate at his old firm, Kate explained. She left abruptly 15 years ago, and the payments started soon after. My blood ran cold, anticipating the inevitable conclusion. "Selena," Kate said, the weight of the truth crushing me through the phone line. "She has a daughter, a 15-year-old girl named Zoe. I'd stake my license that Robert is her father." I hung up the phone an hour later, the shock so profound I couldn't feel my fingers. 15 years. An entire other child. A whole other life he had been meticulously funding and protecting in the shadows, all while I was managing our household budget. The distance, the excuses, the unexplained expenses. It was a 2-decade-long campaign of deception that extended far beyond a nervous bride-to-be. Zoe, a sister Lysander, never knew he had. The betrayal wasn't just in the cheating, it was in the fundamental monstrous lie of our entire shared history. I looked at Lysander, who was staring intently at the wall, processing the magnitude of the new horror. The time for tears was over. "We have to know for sure about Zoe," I said, my voice steady, the new, hardened steel fully set. "I'll handle the logistics," Kate promised. "But Selena, when this drops, it's going to be a nuclear bomb." "Good," I replied, the word devoid of all warmth. "That's exactly what we're counting on." The next 24 hours were the most surreal of my life. I moved through the house, playing the part of the proud, unsuspecting mother, smiling at florists and discussing seating charts. Every interaction was a lie, every kind word a calculated move. Robert, radiating his false, buoyant confidence, even pulled me close, whispering, "You're a rock, Selena. Couldn't do this without you." I met his gaze, my smile fixed and empty, and felt only a cold, detached revulsion. The man holding me was not my husband. He was a ghost, a fraud, a criminal who was actively plundering our future. That night, after Robert's deep, oblivious snoring began, I executed my quiet, final act of revenge. I crept into the bathroom. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, each beat a terrifying drum of risk. I went to his side of the vanity, and with a hand shaking violently, I took his toothbrush. It was a mundane, intimate object, but it felt like the ultimate violation. I carefully placed the toothbrush headfirst into a small, sterile plastic bag and sealed it shut. It was the crucial evidence Kate needed for the non-legal preliminary DNA comparison. My hands were freezing, yet a terrifying calm settled over me. There was no going back now. My focus was no longer on my marriage. It was on securing justice and protecting the innocent, including the daughter I was just discovering. Before dawn, I placed the evidence for Kate to collect and drove straight to my lawyer's office downtown. The divorce papers were drawn up, signed, and notarized that morning. My life was officially ending today, and there was no contingency plan that involved reconciliation or silence. Then I met Kate in a quiet parking lot outside of town, the grim, concrete setting perfect for the final meeting before the detonation. She opened her laptop. The screen was covered in a dizzying array of numbers, a spreadsheet that detailed the systematic pillaging of my financial life. "He's been taking loans out against your pension plan," she stated, her finger pointing to a highlighted column. The words hit me like a physical punch. This was the retirement account I had so diligently contributed to from my small business. He had drained almost $60,000 in the last 18 months alone. "He would have needed my signature," I whispered, the nausea returning in full force. "He forged it," Kate confirmed, showing me the loan documents side by side with my tax returns. "A good forgery, but not yours." This was beyond deceit. This was theft. He wasn't just breaking my heart, he was robbing me blind, dismantling our security to fund his pathetic fantasy life. And then, the final, absolute truth arrived. Kate handed me a manila envelope. "The preliminary DNA results came in this morning." My hands shook so violently I could barely open the paper. I scanned the scientific jargon until my eyes found the conclusion at the bottom. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Zoe Jensen was Robert's daughter. 15 years of lying, stealing, and living a double life, all confirmed by a swab from a stolen toothbrush. The pain was too massive to cry. It turned into a cold, hard, terrifying resolution. "Put it with the rest of the evidence," I said, my voice stripped of all emotion, now just a mechanical tool for survival. "He's not just going to lose his wife, he's going to lose everything." The wedding was still scheduled for 4 p.m. I had to focus. Robert was a serial philanderer and a financial fraudster. But Lysander was still set to marry his mistress Seraphina. I needed to fully understand the enemy that was about to infiltrate my family. Sitting in the car with Kate, I asked her the question that felt almost secondary to the DNA bomb, but was crucial for Lysander. "What about Seraphina? You said there was more on her." Kate's expression hardened, moving from pity for me to pure professional disdain for the young woman. "She's not just sleeping with your husband, she's an embezzler." The word hung in the air, heavy and shocking. Seraphina, the beautiful, ambitious architect from a respectable Atlanta family, was a thief. Kate displayed a series of internal financial reports, inflated expense reports, fake invoices for non-existent consulting work, all designed to siphon money into a private bank account. She's been stealing steadily. Over the last year, she's embezzled more than $200,000 from her partners, Kate stated, tapping the screen. I stared at the screen, a new kind of fury burning away the last of my shock. This was no longer a matter of a broken heart. It was a matter of protecting Lysander from a monster. Seraphina was bringing her corruption, her lies, and her criminal enterprise into the heart of my family. And Robert? Did he know? I asked. Though the answer hardly mattered, his own actions were despicable enough. "He was blinded by his own ego," Kate said with a dry twist of her lips. "Some of the money he stole from your pension plan. He invested in a sure-thing real estate deal Seraphina recommended to him." "The deal never existed," Kate confirmed. "She stole from him, too. It went straight into that secret account of hers." The bitter irony of it almost made me laugh. My brilliant, charming husband, the one who always thought he was the smartest person in the room, was being conned by the woman he was risking everything for. He was so infatuated he didn't see she was emptying his pockets too. This was a perfect, disgusting circle of deceit. The realization brought a cold, terrifying sense of justice. We spent another hour going over Kate's meticulously gathered evidence: bank statements, forged loan documents, surveillance photos, and now a full criminal file on Seraphina's activities, ready for the prosecutor. The fatigue was overwhelming, a physical weight on my chest. "Kate, can we really stand up in front of 300 people and do this?" I whispered, my confidence momentarily wavering. "Selina." "Look at what you have in your hand," Kate insisted. "This is an indictment. If you confront them in private, they will lie, manipulate you, and make you think you're the crazy one. This is the only way to ensure consequences. The lies have to stop forever." I took a deep, shuddering breath. "You're right," I said, my voice clear and firm. "It's the only way." I put the car in drive. "Let's go. We have a wedding to prepare for." The final hours before the wedding were a strange, silent blur. I returned to the house, now buzzing with guests and wedding staff, and slipped back into the role of the calm maternal host. I smiled at my cousins, complimented my sister-in-law's dress, and assured the caterer that everything was wonderful. Inside, I was a coil of tension and grief, but outside, I was flawless. Robert was in his element. Socializing, accepting congratulations with a wide, confident smile. He pulled me aside at one point, his arm heavy around my waist. "You look beautiful, Selina," he murmured. "Isn't it a perfect day?" I looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man I had loved for more than half my life, and felt nothing but cold, desolate emptiness. "Perfect day," I lied, smiling back. Lysander was a mirror of my composure. He greeted his friends, posed for photos with his groomsmen, and played his part perfectly. But every time his eyes met mine across the lawn, I could see the same steel resolve. We were in this together, soldiers waiting for the signal to strike. Kate, disguised in a crisp catering uniform, had already set up her equipment. Her laptop was connected to the large projection screen, supposedly for a sentimental slideshow. She had a small, single-button remote control tucked into her pocket, the detonation trigger. I had my own finality tucked into my clutch purse, the notarized divorce papers signed a week ago, and the flash drive of evidence. One way or another, my marriage would officially end today. I wasn't just planning a confrontation. I was planning the first day of the rest of my life. At 4:05 p.m., I took my seat in the front row. The string quartet began to play, and the wedding party made their entrance. Robert sat beside me, squeezing my hand with what appeared to be genuine affection. I forced myself not to pull away. Serafina appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white lace. She looked radiant, poised, and utterly fraudulent. She smiled at the crowd. Then her eyes found Robert in the front row. For a split second, a look passed between them, a look of shared secrets, of triumphant conspiracy. They thought they had won. They thought they were just minutes away from cementing their perfect deceptive future. Lysander stood at the altar, his face an unreadable mask. The ceremony began, filled with words about love, commitment, and fidelity, the ultimate joke. Finally, the officiant reached the critical moment. He smiled benevolently at the crowd. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The air froze. 300 guests held their breath. Lysander looked across the lawn, his eyes landing on mine. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. I took a slow, deliberate breath, pressed my hands against my dress to steady them, and then, with the absolute clarity of a woman who had nothing left to lose, I stood up. The collective gasp that ran through the garden was like a physical wave. The music died instantly. All heads turned toward me, their faces a mix of confusion, shock, and rising dread. Robert, sitting next to me, went rigid. "Selina, what are you doing?" he hissed, his hand grabbing my arm. "Sit down, you're making a scene." I shook his hand off as if it were a venomous snake. I looked past him, my eyes fixed on my son, Lysander, who stood at the altar, resolute. Then I looked at Serafina, whose radiant smile had frozen into a mask of pure horror. "I apologize to all of you," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent garden. But the officiant asked if there was any reason this marriage should not proceed. And yes, I confirmed, letting the weight of the words crush the silence. "I do. I have a reason." The murmuring started immediately. Judge Ellington, Serafina's father, stood up, his face crimson with indignation. "Mrs. Clinton, what is the meaning of this?" he boomed. "The meaning, Judge Ellington," I replied, turning to face him, "is that your daughter is about to marry my son under false pretenses, and I believe you all deserve to know the truth." I pulled the small remote control from my clutch purse. "The truth?" Robert sputtered, his face flushing with frantic denial and rage. "You're making this up, Selina. You're humiliating our son." "Am I, Robert?" I asked, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "Or is it you and your mistress who have humiliated him?" With that, I pressed the button. Behind the altar, the large projection screen sprang to life. The first image was a crisp surveillance photograph of Robert and Serafina locked in that passionate kiss in my living room, the one Lysander and I had witnessed just the day before. The crowd erupted. There were screams, gasps, people standing up to get a better look. I saw Serafina's mother clutch her chest, her face ashen. Robert was on his feet, shouting, "This is fake! She's having a nervous breakdown!" "Am I, Robert?" I asked, my voice rising above the chaos. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The screen changed, a sickening collage of their secret meetings at the St. Regis Atlanta, documented, dated, and exposed for all to see. The crowd's noise died down, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. This was no longer just a jealous outburst. "This wasn't just a fling," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "This was a financially calculated affair. My husband has been systematically stealing from our family's retirement savings to fund his infidelity." The screen flashed the bank statements, the suspicious cash withdrawals, the forged signatures on the pension plan loan documents, and the receipt for a $15,000 Cartier necklace that Serafina wore in the next photo. "And his fiancée," I announced, my voice dripping with venom, "has also been busy." The next slide showed the evidence of Serafina's embezzlement from her law firm. Then I delivered the final, most devastating blow. But the true heart of the deceit that has defined my marriage is that my husband's lies didn't start with Serafina. The DNA test results filled the screen. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Below it, a photo of a pretty, smiling 15-year-old girl. "This is Zoe Jensen," I said, my voice trembling with 15 years of repressed pain. "She is Robert's daughter, a daughter he has kept hidden from me and his own son for her entire life." The silence that followed was absolute. The absolute silence in the garden broke with a single, sharp, agonizing sob from Serafina. She staggered, her beautiful wedding dress now looking obscene, and collapsed onto the lawn, a heap of shattered dreams. The garden erupted into total chaos. People were yelling, pointing, pulling out their phones to record the disaster. Robert, my former husband, froze for a moment, his face a horrifying mix of rage, panic, and sheer defeat. He was trapped, and there were no lies left that could talk his way out of this. Then, he did the only thing a true coward could do. He ran. He bolted from the front row, shoving violently through the stunned guests, knocking over a tray of champagne glasses as he scrambled toward the parking area. He was literally trying to flee the scene of his own life's implosion. But he forgot about Kate. My sister, still in her crisp catering uniform, stepped out from behind a large oak tree bordering the property. She moved with the silent, deadly precision of a seasoned cop. As Robert ran past, Kate put out her foot in a perfectly executed trip. He fell hard, hitting the manicured lawn with a sickening thud and sliding several feet in his expensive suit. "Going somewhere, Robert?" Kate asked casually, walking over to where he lay, sprawled and gasping. Lysander, finally moving from the altar, was instantly by my side, his arm wrapped firmly around me. Serafina, now half supported by her wailing mother, pointed a shaking, lace-gloved finger at me. "You planned this," she shrieked, her voice high with hysteria. "You ruined my life." "No, Serafina," Lysander cut in, his voice cold and clear. "You ruined your own life, you and him." He gestured toward his father, who was now being helped up by Kate. "Can't do that, Frankie," Kate said, using a childhood nickname that made him flinch. "I'm a licensed private investigator, and I have reason to believe you've committed multiple felonies, including financial fraud." Kate looked over her shoulder. 2 uniformed police officers were walking calmly through the parting crowd. They weren't there for Robert's fraud yet. That would be a civil matter for my lawyer. They were there for Serafina. Her eyes went wide with pure terror. "Serafina Ellington?" one of the officers asked, his voice quiet but authoritative. "You are under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud." As the officer gently but firmly took her arms, the handcuffs clicked shut. The sound was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I watched her face crumble as the realization hit her. This was not just public humiliation. This was real, life-altering legal consequences. The 3 hours that followed the arrest were a disorienting mix of flashing blue lights, hushed conversations, and the slow, painful process of dismantling a wedding that never was. The police took our statements. Serafina was driven away in a patrol car, her white dress looking tragically out of place. Robert, after being briefly questioned, simply got into his car and disappeared without a word to me or his son. He fled the scene of his own life's implosion. The story, as expected, exploded in the local media. Wedding day. Betrayal. Fiancée arrested at altar. Groom's father implicated in decades of deceit. Our names and faces were everywhere. I stopped answering the phone. My small CPA firm suffered. Longtime clients, uncomfortable with the notoriety, quietly took their business elsewhere. The financial hit was a cruel reminder that Robert's crimes had a very real, personal cost on my life and livelihood. The day after the wedding, I filed the signed divorce papers and the flash drive of evidence. With the mountain of proof, Robert didn't even try to fight. The legal process was swift and brutal. In the final settlement, I was awarded the house and a significant portion of his remaining assets as compensation for the $60,000 he had stolen from our retirement funds. It wasn't a victory, it was restitution, a reclaiming of what was rightfully mine. Serafina, facing overwhelming evidence, took a plea deal. 2 years in a low-security prison. Her career was over, and her family's reputation was shredded. Robert's fall was quieter, but no less complete. He lost his job, his colleagues abandoned him, and the community's respect vanished. He moved into a small, miserable apartment across town, a ghost of the confident man he once was. But the most complicated part of the aftermath was Zoe. 2 weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived from Nichelle Jensen, Zoe's mother. She apologized for the pain her past relationship with Robert had caused and said her daughter Zoe, who had learned the truth from the news, wanted to meet Lysander and me. I sat with that letter for 3 days. This girl was the living embodiment of my deepest betrayal, yet she was also an innocent victim. She was my son's sister. Lysander read the letter, his face grim but resolute. "I want to meet her, Mom," he said immediately. "She's my sister. She deserves to know her family, or what's left of it." I made the call. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop in a town halfway between our respective homes. I was terrified, twisting my napkin into a frayed mess as we waited. What do I say? How do I look at the child of his secret life? Then they walked in. Nichelle was an ordinary, tired-looking woman who seemed to carry the weight of her secrets in the slump of her shoulders, and behind her was Zoe. The moment I saw her, my breath hitched. She had Robert's eyes, the same dark, intelligent eyes that had first drawn me to him all those years ago. She looked scared and uncertain, clutching a book to her chest like a shield, and in that instant, looking at this innocent girl, I knew my anger was not with her. It was with him, always him. Zoe was not a symbol of betrayal. She was simply a casualty, a child caught in the crossfire. That first meeting was agonizingly awkward. Words felt clumsy and inadequate. Lysander, bless his heart, stepped into the void. He did most of the talking. He asked Zoe about her high school, about the book she was holding, about her dreams. He didn't ask a single question about Robert. He simply treated her like a person, like a sister he was meeting for the first time. I, for the most part, just watched, trying to reconcile the image of this shy, sweet girl with the monumental lie she represented. Slowly, tentatively, we began to build something new. We met again a week later for lunch, then for a quick coffee. Lysander and Zoe started texting, discovering a shared, surprising love for old movies and spicy food. The connection between them was immediate and easy, a natural bond despite the monstrous efforts of their father to keep them apart. I found myself looking forward to seeing her, hearing about her life. She was bright, funny, and incredibly kind, an innocent soul, and my heart, still fractured, began to warm towards her. She was no longer the devastating proof of Robert's betrayal. She was simply Zoe, Lysander's sister, and in a strange, unexpected way, a part of my surviving family. The fierce, protective love I felt for my son began to extend to her. This young woman who had become an unexpected part of my survival. The healing was slow, but it was real. A year passed, a quiet, necessary period of rebuilding. The media storm subsided, and my personal life retreated into a welcome obscurity. I poured my energy into rebuilding my CPA firm, slowly regaining the trust of my clients. I also made a drastic, necessary change. I sold the large family home in Atlanta, the house full of beautiful, suffocating ghosts and lies. I bought a smaller, more manageable townhome in Roswell, Georgia, a clean slate that was entirely mine. Lysander, after months of intense therapy, was thriving. The destruction of his wedding had, ironically, set him free. He left his corporate job, the safe but passionless career Robert had pushed him toward, and went back to school to pursue his true passion, landscape architecture. He was designing beautiful, ordered spaces, creating order and beauty out of dirt and stone, a perfect metaphor for what he was doing with his own life. He was dating a lovely young woman, Evelyn, a kind and genuine librarian who looked at him like he was the only person in the world. She wasn't flashy or ambitious like Serafina. She was simply good. I looked at my son, saw the healed wounds in his eyes, and knew that he had navigated the trauma with a profound grace I hadn't thought possible. And Zoe had become a genuine part of our new, smaller family unit. She came over for dinner every other Sunday. She and Lysander had developed a strong, real sibling bond, their banter filled with teasing and shared jokes. I found myself cooking for three, a simple, deeply satisfying ritual. She was no longer a symbol of anything. She was just Zoe, a sweet, bright girl who made my son happy and filled my new, quiet life with a soft, necessary warmth. One quiet Sunday evening, a year after the catastrophe, I was sitting in the living room of my new home when the doorbell rang. It was Robert. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since the moment he fled our ruined reception. He looked diminished, older, grayer, the confident arrogance gone, replaced by a deep, weary defeat. He asked if he could come in. I hesitated. Then I stood aside. 5 minutes, I said, my voice steady, devoid of any warmth or malice. Robert stepped inside, looking awkward and out of place in the smaller, cleaner space. He didn't sit down. He stood by the small, new fireplace I had installed, a pale, pathetic echo of the scene he had created by the old one. He spoke slowly, quietly, telling me he was in therapy, trying to understand the why of his actions, the deep-seated narcissism and insecurity that had fueled decades of lies. He said he was sorry. He apologized for the lies, for the theft, for the betrayal, and most profoundly, for the pain he had caused Lysander and Zoe. I listened, my face impassive. I watched his eyes, searched for the telltale glint of the old charmer, but it was gone. He sounded genuine, broken, and utterly defeated, and in that moment I knew he was telling the truth. "I forgive you, Robert," I said, the words surprising even me. My voice was calm and strong. "And I mean that, not for you, but for me." I stepped closer, looking him directly in his tired, defeated eyes. "I can't carry that anger anymore. It's too heavy. I was destroying myself with it, and I won't do that again." The forgiveness was a surgical act, a liberation of my own spirit from the chains of his sin. But I had to deliver the final, irrevocable boundary. "But you need to understand this," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I will never, ever trust you again. We can never go back to what we had. That life is dead." He nodded slowly, a sheen of tears in his eyes, a silent, profound acceptance of his fate. He didn't beg or plead. He simply stood there, receiving the final judgment of the woman he had destroyed. "I know," he whispered, the sound a ragged breath. He looked around the new, simple living room, a place that held no ghosts for him, only the reality of his own exclusion. He was finally seeing the quiet, self-sufficient woman he had traded for an illusion. He turned, walked to the door, and left. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, the release of tension leaving me weak but exhilarated. The chapter of my life with Robert was officially, irrevocably closed, not with rage, but with a quiet final act of personal forgiveness. That night, as I got ready for bed, I found myself thinking about the woman I was 2 years ago, crouched in the dirt behind the hydrangeas. She was so broken, so lost, consumed by fire. I wished I could go back and tell her that the pain wasn't the end of the story. It was simply the necessary, violent beginning of a new, beautiful, and honest one. 2 years later, I stood in my new garden, pruning the lilac bush that had been my witness. I was Selena Clinton, an accountant, a mother, and a survivor. The pain had faded, morphing into a deep, resilient scar that testified not to the injury, but to the healing. I was not defined by my ex-husband's betrayal, but by my own decision to face the absolute truth and reclaim my life. Lysander pulled into the driveway with Evelyn. They were planning their wedding, a small, honest ceremony at a botanical garden. He bounded out of the car, his face alight with enthusiasm. "It's all coming together, Momus," he said, the pure joy in his voice, a melody of my own hard-won peace. His life was built on authenticity, a beautiful, sturdy architecture that would never crumble under the weight of lies. The back door opened, and Zoe walked out, a stack of freshly baked cookies in her hands. She had become a vital thread in the new, resilient fabric of our small family. She looked up, and I saw her father's features. But they held a depth of kindness and integrity that was entirely hers. She was no longer just a daughter from a lie. She was a sister, a friend, a beautiful complexity. I watched her and Lysander, my 2 children, and realized my family hadn't been demolished. It had been painfully, violently, and ultimately correctly reconfigured. The perfect family I had strived to maintain was a lie. It shattered into a million pieces on that sunny wedding afternoon. But what Lysander, Zoe, and I built in its place was smaller, imperfect, and hard-earned, but it was honest. It was a life built not on comfortable lies, but on a difficult, painful, and ultimately freeing truth. We had lost the illusion of everything, but in doing so, we had found something real. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for a catastrophe or chasing an illusion. I was simply living, fully and authentically. That was enough. That was everything. Thank you for staying with me through every agonizing truth and every step of my journey toward healing. If my story of betrayal, strength, and finding a new kind of family resonated with you, please show your support. Hit the like button right now, and in the comments below, share one word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words matter, and they are a vital part of my closure. See you next time.